It is August 1751, and the gates of Arcot Fort are buckling. A European-backed army is trying to shatter those doors using charging war elephants. Inside, the commander holding the line isn't a seasoned general. He is a 25-year-old former accounting clerk named Robert Clive. His garrison is vastly outnumbered, starving, and bracing against an enemy specifically maneuvering these heavy beasts to force the gates. But there is something strange about this siege. Clive is an unpaid civilian working for a British trading company, fighting a localized army taking orders from French officers. Yet Britain and France are officially at peace. To understand how a clerk ended up defending a fort against elephants, we have to look at the ruthless shadow war raging behind the scenes for the wealth of the Indian subcontinent. The theater for this conflict is the Coromandel Coast, a stretch of southeastern India that serves as a massively lucrative hub for global trade. By the mid-18th century, the once dominant Mughal Empire is fracturing. As central authority collapses, local regional governors, known as nababs, are left fighting over succession and territory. The British and French East India companies, operating in these ports, see an opportunity. Both want a monopoly on the region's trade, but declaring an outright national war is incredibly expensive and risks drawing in the home governments. So they adopt a different tactic. Rather than fighting directly, they decide to sponsor rival claimants to the local thrones, turning succession disputes into proxy wars. The escalation begins in 1749 with the French governor, Monsieur Dupleix. He devises an aggressive scheme to dominate the coast by installing his own puppet rulers. Working with local proxies named Muzaffar Jing and Chunda Sahib, Dupleix orchestrates a sudden attack on the plains of Arcot. They successfully assassinate the sitting Nawab and seize control of the province. Facing the prospect of a completely French-controlled trading zone, the British immediately counter. They throw their military support behind the dead Nawab's son and his powerful regional ally, Nazir Jing. What started as a local dispute over who gets to govern Arcot is now a full-scale proxy conflict, with French and British officers directing local armies against one another. By late 1750, the British strategy appears to be working. Their ally, Nazir Jing, commands a massive army and successfully traps the French forces in a blockade at a fort called Jinji. But the British miscalculate the depth of French espionage. Inside Nazir Jing's camp, his own prime minister and several allied commanders have already been bought off by the French. The trap is sprung on December 5th. At 3 o'clock in the morning, a column of French soldiers marches silently toward Nazir Jing's sprawling encampment. They use a highly coordinated signaling tactic in the dark. The French troops fire blank powder at the quarters of their secret allies to identify themselves, while firing live ball ammunition at anyone trying to organize a defense. Woken by the gunfire, Nazir Jing mounts his elephant and rides to confront his allied commanders for their inaction. Instead of apologizing, they draw their pistols and fire at him point blank. They cut off his head, place it on a spear, and expose it to the entire army. With their leader dead, the resistance collapses immediately. In a matter of hours, Dupleix's proxy strategy dismantles the British alliance. By mid-1751, the surviving British-backed forces are besieged at a fort in Trichinopoli, desperate for a miracle to break the French momentum. To save Trichinopoli, Robert Clive realizes he has to pull the French-backed army away from the siege. He proposes a massive, incredibly risky diversion, taking a tiny force of men and striking straight for Arcot, the regional capital. The sheer audacity of a handful of soldiers marching directly on the capital catches the defenders completely off guard. Clive manages to take possession of the Arcot fort without facing any opposition. Once inside, Clive issues a strict order. He refuses to plunder the city's wealth, guaranteeing full payment for any local grain or supplies. This decision pays off immediately. Grateful locals supply Clive with invaluable intelligence about the French-backed army marching to retake the fort. Clive's diplomatic foresight allowed a tiny, outnumbered force to successfully brace for the climactic elephant assault, which brings us back to the buckling doors of Arcot Fort. Because Clive knew exactly where and how the enemy would strike on the morning of the siege, his men are ready. When the massive war elephants finally charge through the gates, Clive's garrison opens fire with concentrated musket volleys. The relentless barrage turns the terrified animals around, causing them to trample their own troops and entirely breaking the siege. Clive's unlikely diversion turned the tide of the entire proxy war. By holding Arcot, he shattered Dupleix's grand ambitions and saved the British position on the coast. This conflict proved that European powers could expand by weaponizing local fractures and funding betrayals rather than relying solely on national armies. The Shadow War on the Coromandel coast provided the British East India Company with a ruthless tactical blueprint, one they would use to systematically dismantle the entire subcontinent over the next century.